Week 3 is officially in the books, and the injuries are getting so serious right now. Last week in week 2, we had QB injury central, and this week we lost a fair few players from James Conner to Najee Harris, CeeDee Lamb potentially for a while, and a few other players trickling through like Mike Evans, who we think could potentially miss some serious time. That means that as your teams are starting to get really into the fantasy football season, you need to be prioritising that waiver wire run to make sure you are picking up some of the hidden gems still available on the wire. And while I am going to kick off this episode with a few players who are quite heavily rostered but still available and could really be those league-winning positions, this waiver wire episode is filled with players less than 10% rostered who have a real chance to perform in 2025. Now I am going to be talking through a few of them as well as to whether or not I think you really should be rostering them or whether the hype is going to be particularly real, but they are there in most leagues, so they are players you need to be thinking about whether or not you want to be putting in claims for. If you like content like this, please consider liking and subscribing. But let's get into it with the first player, and that is Trey Benson of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Trey Benson has actually had a little bit of a breakout year so far. He has been seeing way more of the backfield share than we saw from him last season, kind of aiming towards 60-30, maybe 50-60-30. 60-40 is the correct math, 65-35, something like that, between him and James Conner. I've been quite impressed with what I've seen from him as well, particularly in the receiving game, and he has been playing a fair amount of third down, so really disappointing start to his career for Trey Benson, but this season looked to be turning things around. James Conner went out with a quite serious looking injury at the end of the game yesterday against the 49ers, and Trey Benson is going to be the starting back in Arizona. Now, Trey Benson is actually rostered in a fair amount of leagues, as you can see, but that still means that he's available in a lot of them as well, so it's worth going out and seeing whether or not he's available in yours. Benson is exactly the kind of player that a manager is going to now be kicking themselves that they dropped last week and now is going to be a league-winning running back. Being able to get a starting back off the waiver wire for the rest of the season is absolutely huge, and this is why Benson is the priority target for this week. You need to be going out and seeing if he's available because he's going to start potentially for the rest of the season in Arizona. The next player that you need to be targeting is Hunter Henry, and this one doesn't sound particularly sexy, but it is a priority. Hunter Henry wasn't just the target leader on the Patriots this last week, he was the tight end 1 on the week, finishing with 11 targets, 8 receptions, and 2 touchdowns. Now, if you've watched any of my content across the past year, Hunter Henry seemed to always come up on my waiver wire videos throughout last year, and this year it's exactly the same. He is available in 60% of redraft leagues on Sleeper and should be the priority tight end pickup heading into this next week. The tight end landscape isn't really what we want it to be so far. No one has been particularly dominant, especially with Brock Bowers picking up an injury, Trey McBride finally scoring touchdowns, but the Cardinals offense really dropping off, so tight end streaming is going to be king this year. Going into this year, the receiving depth chart in New England led a lot of people to thinking that a receiver would emerge as the clear-cut target, and honestly that has been the case. It's just not the way that we wanted it to be. It's not Carl Williams, it's not Stephon Diggs, it's not Kayshon Boutte, it is indeed Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry is someone you should be looking to splurge a fair amount of fab on, and I think he should be a weekly starter going on from here. The next player to look at is Luther Burden. Now, Luther Burden exploded this week for a 65-yard touchdown on a trick play. Last week, Luther Burden was actually in my drop candidates section, and he is available in 74% of leagues, rostered in just 26. Burden is a really interesting one to me, because he obviously did show that ability to break open deep down the field on the trick play this last week. But to me, in Ben Johnson offenses, sometimes a play will be schemed for a particular player that wouldn't really be who you'd expect. It's obviously not quite the same as throwing passes to Penei Sewell or getting Penei Sewell himself to actually throw passes, but Johnson will scheme things for a player in particular. Now, the head coach and the offensive coordinator have both come out in this past week and said we need to be targeting Luther Burden more, we need to be getting him more involved. You actually did see Colston Loveland getting more involved before he left with an injury as well. He had 3 targets in the first half and just over 30 yards, which was pretty exciting. For me with Burden, I'm not really believing this one just yet. If you have space on the bottom of your bench, I think he's probably someone you can look towards and look to stash, but Rome Odunze is so established as the number one target here, and DJ Moore is always going to get his. So Luther Burden for me, probably someone that I'm looking to pick up, but maybe only if I have space and only if the cost is relatively cheap. I kind of want to see it for 2 weeks with Burden before I pick him up. I have a feeling this is going to be someone that you're not going to know when to start this year, because he's going to explode some weeks and show that athletic ability that we know he had. We know he's explosive after the catch, but some weeks he's going to be doing absolutely sweet F all. If you're enjoying this video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing to the channel. There is so much more content coming your way, and all you have to do to get all of it for free is click one little button. Click down below and get involved with everything I've got coming out these next few weeks. We are now getting on to the lowest rostered players of the video, and everyone left in this video is less than 10% rostered in redraft leagues on Sleeper. We are kicking off with the wide receiver 1 on the week, and that is Tre Tucker of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, this is a really interesting one to me. Tre Tucker absolutely exploded for over 140 yards and for 3 touchdowns this last week. Finishes as a wide receiver 1. I think he's currently sat at the wide receiver 3 or maybe wide receiver 4 on the season, but it's early enough that obviously players exploding in 1 week will mean that they sit really high in the overall rankings despite having not done a huge amount else. I wanted to take a look at Tucker throughout the rest of the season and see whether or not this is actually relatively reliable, because we know that the receiving core in Las Vegas, it is pretty difficult to try and judge. Outside of Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers, they've been really switching between Dante Thornton, trying to get Jack Besh a little bit involved, and then Tucker himself. To be honest, I am completely not believing this one. People are going to waste fab on Tre Tucker, and I don't think the talent is truly there. I know that feels a lot to say after he just exploded for a 3 touchdown performance, but I feel like this is going to be one where in a couple of years we go, do you remember that DFS week that Tre Tucker was the player that you needed in your lineups, and players won millions of dollars based off having him when it actively was a bad decision in advance? I feel like this was just a perfect storm for Tucker, and I'd be surprised if he does anything similar going forwards. Again, if you have space and you want to roster him at the back of your roster, that's fine, but you're never going to be confident to start Tucker. I don't think this is the start of a breakout career for him. I think this is a flash in the pan, and we're never going to see anything similar going forwards. The next player that I want to talk about, and someone I'm slightly more interested in, is Kavonte Turpin of the Dallas Cowboys. Again, only 5% rostered on Sleeper, and someone you need to be taking a look at. The Cowboys' receiving game is where they make their money. Dak Prescott has actually been playing pretty well, despite the fact that they have been losing, and CeeDee Lamb has just gone out. What I would anticipate in this scenario is that George Pickens and Jake Ferguson see absurd target volumes, and we did see it towards the end of the game yesterday, with Jake Ferguson currently being on pace for something like 140 targets in 2025. If CeeDee Lamb misses any real time, they are going to have to move things around a little bit, and George Pickens might see some time in the slot, but more likely I think Kavonte Turpin is the one to take that role. Turpin has been used as a gadget player and as someone for special trick plays as well as thriving on special teams across the last couple of years. He actually saw more targets than the other receivers on this team, particularly Jalen Tolbert, who's going to be the other one that we argue about going into this week. But he saw more targets even if he finished with less yards in the game on Sunday. Turpin for me is an explosive player who I think could always do more if he had the opportunity to do more, and maybe with CeeDee Lamb out he'll finally get the opportunity, particularly as him exploding on special teams means that he'll have the trust of the coordinators on this team. Turpin could be a star if CeeDee Lamb misses real time, and even so I think he'll probably see the target volume that Tolbert won't, and I imagine he might end up sitting around the flex range, and that's someone that's available for incredibly cheap because people aren't going to be looking towards him, in contrast to potentially someone like Tucker, who just had the explosive game. Tory Horton is someone that I've been really in on all season. If you follow any of my work writing for DLF, you'll notice that I write about him in basically every single article that I write. And I wrote him up I did his pre-draft, I did his post-draft analysis, and basically I love the fit with the Seahawks the entire time as a developmental wide receiver 3 who can win deep, and someone that I thought I really liked some of what I saw from him at Colorado State, but he needed a bit of time to develop. He could win consistently on the outside, but he needed a bit of time to put things together. First of all, Marquez Valdes-Scantling was cut in the offseason, so he immediately won the wide receiver 3 role, and secondly, he's actually been getting on the field a fair amount and producing with it. He is currently the joint rookie touchdown leader, shared with Emeka Egbuka, and scored 2 touchdowns this last week, one on a electric kickoff return and one in the receiving game as well. It was a blowout win, so they could afford to give some more opportunities to some of the younger players, but Tory Horton is an explosive athlete and he offers a level of dynamism to his game that they don't really have from the other receivers. He can win consistently on the edge, he can beat players deep, he has fantastic body control at the boundary, and I think the matchup with Sam Darnold and with Jalen Milroe as well for the long term is something that I think is going to really help Tory Horton going forward. For me, he was always a developmental prospect, but not someone that I thought would do a huge amount in redraft this year. But now, I think he needs to be on the bottom of your roster, and he's only 8% rostered in redraft leagues on Sleeper, so he is so cheap to go and get and just put on the bottom of your roster and see what happens. You can cut him in a couple of weeks, but if he continues on this path, he's gonna be a flex level player by the end of the 2025 season. And in Dynasty, if you're watching this and you also play Dynasty and you're thinking, maybe Lewis has some advice for me there, here's a hidden gem. Go and offer a 2026 third for him. See if you can get it done, because I am all in on this player. I lied a little bit. This next player isn't under 10% rostered, but he is 10% rostered, and this is a bit of a wider conversation. So Chris Rodriguez was the rushing leader on the team this last week, or he saw the most rushing volume. He had the most carries on the Commanders this past week. Jeremy McNichols did rip off a huge touchdown, so he was the yardage leader, and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt did score as well. So it's a really difficult one. Chris Rodriguez saw the most carries. He saw the highest volume of carries, and ultimately, that's the way you probably should tend to lean. And my thinking with the Commanders' backfield at this point in time is that I want to roster basically all of them and not start them until a clear leader emerges. I have never been convinced by the talent of Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, not while he was in college, not in the first couple of weeks with the Commanders. I know he's seeing a tremendous amount of playing time, partly due to the Austin Eckler injury, partly due to the Brian Robinson trade, which I think they probably regret at this point in time. I think they probably wish they had a solid veteran back on the roster. But my point here is that Chris Rodriguez was had the highest volume of any Commanders running back this last week, and I think therefore you need to be looking to roster him. Again, it's at the back of your roster, and just see if there's another injury. You're going to see these veterans get a huge amount of playing time. I think, to be honest, Jeremy McNichols is going to have the third down work, so it's between Rodriguez and JCM for the main rushing work. And given that they lean towards Rodriguez this last week, he's a player that I'm willing to invest in and just see what happens. But for all three of them, I am not confident enough to start them anytime soon. The last player that I'm going to talk about is someone I can't believe I am talking about in 2025, but it's Sterling Shephard of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, the Bucs came into the year with one of the deepest receiving depth charts of any team in the NFL, and it has been completely decimated, with Jalen McMillan going on to IR before the season even started. Chris Godwin didn't start on PUP, but he is unlikely to play until at least week 5, and now Mike Evans going down with a hamstring problem. Emeka Egbuka has also been banged up as well, so they are really struggling at wide receiver and on the offensive line, which was two strengths of the team going into the year. Sterling Shephard basically played every snap the moment that Mike Evans went out, and he is likely to be an every down player for the Bucs going into the next couple of weeks. The Bucs across the last year had one of the highest passing volumes of any team in the NFL, and they love thriving on that yards after the catch situation, which is where Sterling Shephard has been able to thrive in the last few years, particularly in the early years of his career. Sterling Shephard is still a fine player. He is old now, he is slowed down, he's not dynamic at at all, so it might be they just pepper Agbuka with 20 targets per game, but at 2% rostered, he needs to be on rosters going forwards. The recent reporting is that Mike Evans won't be out for too long, and obviously Chris Godwin will be back, hopefully in week 5, but both those things could just not be true. Evans could miss the majority of the season, given he has a history of hamstring issues, and Godwin's health has been so up in the air the entire offseason and the season so far. So Shephard in a high volume passing attack as the starting wide receiver alongside Emeka Egbuka in 2 wide receiver sets should be a priority for you this next week. And we're going to end, as per always, with drop candidates. Now, I actually made this before the news came out about Najee Harris definitely being confirmed with an Achilles. He's obviously a drop candidate. He's not going to play the rest of this season. When you saw it happen, you knew what that was, so you can absolutely get him off your roster. There is no hope for an Achilles tear. It's clearly what happened returning this next season. But the 2 other candidates I want to talk about is Michael Penix, who is just not willing to throw the ball downfield at the moment. His ADOT is so much lower. His yards per attempt is so much lower than it was in his spell at the end of the season last year. I think he's a drop candidate. If you really liked the idea of him exploding this year, it's just not happening. He had maybe his worst game as a pro. He is basically a rookie quarterback, so you have to give him time, but he's not going to be fancy relevant this season. Then Dylan Sampson, the week 1 hero and someone that everyone was talking about as a priority. Then Quinshon Judkins came back immediately and took over the backfield, and in week 2 he saw a little bit of the work mixed in, did see the majority but not by a huge amount, and then in week 3 it was basically an 80% share for Quinshon Judkins. Dylan Sampson is droppable in all formats, and to be honest, Judkins, as I said a few weeks ago, could be the waiver wire winner of this season. If someone dropped him because they were frustrated, or he even went undrafted if you were drafting pretty late, Judkins could end up being the sneaky success of this year.